Kevin Liston.
And I'm Joshua Crocker.
And this is Kicking for a Living,
podcast about martial arts and business from two martial arts instructors.
Well, I'm very excited. It's always good. We've been getting more guests on, and I'm really excited. We have Isabelle here. She is one of our former students. She moved. She's been training. She's training at another dojo, and she is here to talk to us. So thank you, Isabelle, for being here.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
It's great to have you here.
And so you're here because we're doing, and if you listen to our last podcast, we're doing our testing this week, and you are here to participate and join in, and we're excited that you made the trip back for our testing. I think we even talked about how we have people that do that, that come back for our testing. So, and you've only gone through your first day so far of that, but we have a lot of stuff to talk about. But really, before we get into the meat and bones, just kind of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your martial arts journey, and so we and everyone listening can kind of get a heads up.
Okay. Well, my name is Isabelle Rico, and I started in martial arts a long time ago, actually, when I was quite young. And it's an interesting story because my older brother started in martial arts when I was I'd say about 12. And I wanted to, of course, do everything he did, and I wanted to do martial arts with him, but my dad said no. He said, martial arts is not for girls. It was his exact reason for why I couldn't do martial arts. So, which was really, disheartening as a kid, and of course ridiculous. But so my brother would teach me martial arts in secret. So we had kind of like this almost underground martial arts training going on at the house, and
12-year-old underground fight club in the garage.
So every now and then I would get to go and watch his class or whatever, and I just kind of learned on my own, and he taught me, which was actually great for his learning because, as you know, if you teach it, it helps you to learn it better yourself. And so we did that for a number of years, and then eventually later on I got to officially take martial arts myself. And so as a teenager I actually earned a black belt at that point after several years. They didn't, at that dojo, didn't have a junior black belt system. It was a smaller school, but So I earned my black belt, and then just in time to head off to college. And so when I headed off to college, it kind of put an abrupt stop to that. I was out of town, and I wasn't able to continue training at that original dojo. I did do some training on my own, various, they had a Shotokan class that I took that was extremely different from what I had learned before, very traditional, but, did some karate clubs and that type of thing. But I kind of thought that was the end of my martial arts journey, honestly. But then I joined the Navy, and I ended up moving around in the military life. You move every couple of years, and I just couldn't quite stay away from martial arts. I always seemed to find a school that I wanted to try out. Later on, as I had children, they started having an interest in martial arts. One of the first times I actually started taking classes again was a stranger danger type scenario with my daughter. We were in a store and someone picked her up, tried to walk off with her. And it was a very frightening experience. And my reaction to that was, first and foremost, grabbing my child and holding her. I didn't really interact with the abductor. I didn't I just kind of froze. And I realized, okay, it's time. We need, my daughter would have willingly gone with this woman, and that was frightening. She was 2.5. And so I realized it's time for her to get some awareness. Even at an early age, I found a class there locally that specialized in not only adult martial arts, but they had a children's program that was stranger danger. It was a lot of how do children defend themselves against abductors and that type of thing. It was perfect. So she started there. And of course, being in that environment, before I knew it, I ended up starting to take classes again. And so I did that. Then we moved again with the military. And in various locations, I would take various different martial arts, either with my children or on my own. It usually, it turned into a family thing where we with my older daughters, we did it together. It's a very bonding type of sport. It's something that's everybody can do at their own level. So we enjoyed, working together, working helping each other. So I would say, I actually lost track of how many different places we did that, but we moved every 2 years, if that tells you anything. And then most recently, we moved to here to Moore, Oklahoma, and we found you guys. Actually, my daughter Hannah started with you guys first, and I was watching as a parent, and I was thinking, wow, I miss this. And
that's always how that seems to go.
And the next thing I know, I'm back in training, and I haven't stopped since. It was so much fun. It was a great thing to do together. And then to me, it's a very addictive thing. It's so much fun on so many levels. It's a great workout. It's good discipline, and you have camaraderie. You get friends really fast when you're, punching each other and rolling around on the floor trying to choke each other out. So I just enjoy the people that I've found in martial arts and the sport itself. And of course, the skills that you learn are just very valuable in general.
It's interesting because we recently, as business owners, had a whole discussion about adults. You get kids in all the time, and everything that you said about why you joined and why you came back mimics what we found with adults. Is that almost every adult that's in martial arts started when they were a kid, did it when they were a kid, left and came back, had someone else, an older brother or something like that did it with them. They always have some other connection to martial arts that keeps them involved or gets them involved or makes them want to be back in that community, as it will. So it's very interesting that seems to be a very common thing for adults, is they either did it when they were young or had some influence from somewhere else in their family that kept them involved or made them like, I always wanted to do it when I was a kid because my dad did it or my brother did it or my cousins, and I never got to, so now that I'm an adult and I can do it, I'm going to do it on my own. Or I do it for my kids, and then I want to get back involved. So it's very interesting to see that is a very common reasoning for people to get in martial arts. And we're so happy, of course, that you found us and have been training with us. And I mean, you've been doing martial arts a very long time in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, breaks here and there.
I think you trained with us for maybe 4 years, about, or you were more about that long?
About 3.5.
3.5.
3.5.
Yes.
So I know that was also through our COVID times and
Yes.
virtual classes.
Yes.
Was a big part of that.
And that was a unique experience. I mean, you guys did such a great job of keeping all of the students engaged, and it really helped us get through it, because there was this sense of normalcy that we still somehow had. We could still train and work out and de-stress and connect, and it was just tremendous to watch how you did that. I mean, because the pandemic was obviously unprecedented. Nobody, I mean, at least I would have never thought of virtual training or anything like that, but it worked, and it was we were so thankful for it, because it just allowed us to. And at that point, Manny was already doing. My son was already doing classes, and he enjoyed it as well. My daughter and I worked together. It was something to focus on that was positive, that brought us back to that normal when everything was, chaotic and more or less miserable.
I mean, I was just gonna say, of my memories of those months, that time, a lot of the virtual classes are what kind of stick out the most from a lot of that is just, training at home. Or I actually was one of the few people who got to go to the dojo and train, since Kevin was up there, my mom was up there so much. I was a part of a lot of those virtual classes from the dojo. And those are some of the better memories I have of that time. And I want to, ever since we started this podcast, one of the episodes I want to do was talking about our kind of experience with the pandemic. We haven't really got into that, so that'll definitely be something we talk about more in the future, how that went.
Well, and I think that's a good segue into our topic today, because if nothing else, when that happened, we adapted. and we said, this is what we have to work with. This is our circumstance. How do we make this work? And what I wanted to kind of bring you in, and I'm excited that you're here about, is talking about working with kids or adults that maybe have special needs or some kind of adapted learning requirement or something they need, and how that is so different than what you would call a normal class of students and things like that. In the grand scheme of things, one could argue it's not different because every person is different, but you do have to change the way you maybe approach a learning process, or the way they learn, and the way that they think about things. And I've worked with a lot of special needs kids. I know, Joshua, you've been working with special needs kids as you've been instructing more. But Isabelle, one of your kids is a special needs kid. I love this kid to death. Manny, I got to do private lessons with him. He is so sweet, such a good kid. But I know you have taken a whole approach and program to helping him learn martial arts. And I want to kind of dive into that and talk about that so people can know some of the wonderful things, but also some of the struggles and kind of what to expect with that. So why is that so important to you? Let's start with there. Why is it so important to you that Manny has this training?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, because I'm very passionate about what we're doing with Manny and what we're seeing that we can hopefully help other people with special needs with. So first of all, Manny is my little boy. He is 10 years old and he has Down syndrome. And so with that come a certain amount of challenges and struggles. So when we first started with martial arts, as I said before, our whole family kind of did martial arts. Our kids, everyone at one point or another were involved in martial arts and trained and enjoyed it. And it was a very good experience as both on the athletic side and on the bonding as a family. It was helpful. So of course I wanted to include Manny in that as well as part of our family. And so when I came to you to first see if Manny could join classes, I was concerned because, Manny could be a little stubborn. He might be a little afraid of being in a group of kids, and I wasn't sure how he would do. I wasn't sure if he would cooperate because he was very kind of stubborn at that point. He didn't want to try a lot of things. I wasn't sure if he would be disruptive to the other children, and if that would bother the parents, or if it would negatively impact learning of the other students or anything along those lines. And so we started off with the private lessons, which were great because number one, Manny loved it. He loved his time with you. I mean, he gained a lot of self-confidence out of that, and also his balance. Like, just for kiddos with Down syndrome, they have low muscle tone. They have, like, aside from cognitive delays and things that they have to deal with, they also have physical things. So the low muscle tone makes it difficult for things like balance and coordination and just being able to get their body to do what they want their body to do. So when you worked with him on balance and coordinating body movements and all of that in the very beginning, when he was really little, he must have been at like 3, I think, when we started, 3 or 4.
Yeah, he was young.
He was small, and so that just helped tremendously. It didn't just help with what he was doing in class. It helped him in life. It helped him be able to walk and to play on the playground, and things that we all kind of just take for granted in our kids. He was able to do those things better. We started noticing changes with his physical therapist and their response, and literally martial arts became his physical therapy. I mean, that was the majority of what we did for the PT side of his therapies, which of course contributes to a lot of things. So he loved it. He loved the time that he spent with you. I think his favorite thing was the grappling and the kind of floor exercises. And so as we progressed with that, he really enjoyed being able to do those things. We didn't quite get to the point where we had him in the regular class, which we were heading towards, but then
now he did he did a few regular classes, and we had some of our assistants come over and work with him.
He did.
Some of those.
He did a few. He did a few, but it was always it was still to the point where he was reluctant to do what he could do with the group. But we were getting there. We were like stepping in that direction with the progress we were making with him. But then we had to move. So part of the military life, I guess, after I left the military, I still went and I'm working for the military as a civilian. And so we ended up moving to North Carolina. But we didn't want to stop his training. I was determined to keep moving forward with that. And so we started working with him. We went almost immediately upon arriving in North Carolina. We found a dojo that teaches a similar mix of martial arts, including Taekwondo and some other of the happier systems, the right word? I don't know. The other arts.
System, style, art.
Yeah.
And so we started working with him there. We put him in the regular class, and I was helping him. I immediately started training there. We both started training together, and he didn't do so well. I was helping him. I was kind of his assistant in the class, which was fine. And then ultimately, I found some junior black belts that were willing to help with some practice for him outside of class. So we focused on an adaptive way of teaching that allowed the inclusion of being in class, because there's benefits to being with other children of, average, like neurotypical kids, as we call them in the special needs community, to be able to be part of that group. But there were things he struggled with, like breaking down the skills into small enough components that he could do them. So for example, doing a kick, as when we do a kick, we know how to do the kick and we just do it, but we all know there's different parts of that, like turning your base foot the right direction, how you chamber the kick and all those things. It took more of an effort for him to learn those things. So we would train with him on non-class days and give him that little extra bit of training that he needed, and then he would be in the regular classes. And as he started getting those skills down, and his confidence improved, and his endurance improved, then he started really enjoying it. He still actually wanted to be in the group class. He started making friends, and the kids were accepting him. So we found that we were onto something, kind of, with how we were approaching that. It's about that time that we started realizing that the martial arts we were doing, and I didn't really make the correlation at first, but we realized that he was starting to talk more, because he was extremely speech delayed, to the point where he only would say, a handful of words.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
And but he started talking more. His grades started improving in school. He started kind of coming out of his shell in more than one ways, and we thought, well, this is great. I didn't really make the full connection though until I went to a seminar that was given at the university in Wilmington. It was a man named Chris Nickick, and he is a young man with Down syndrome who was the first person with Down syndrome to complete a full Ironman triathlon. And he and his father were giving a speech, and they were talking about the fact that as he trained for the event, that they started noticing cognitive improvement in their son and all those types of things. So they pointed us in the direction of a book that I had read at that point called Spark, and it was written by a neuroscientist, and he talks about the effects of aerobic activity on the brain and the cognitive development in the brain. And one of the things in that book that he specifically highlights is martial arts, things like martial arts and dance, where you're not just aerobically, you're not just having an aerobic activity, but it involves complex thought. So when you combine the complex thought with the aerobic activity, then the neurogenesis, if you will, of developing your brain and physically growing your brain is tremendous. And there have been studies on this done for over 20 years. And so we're like, aha, this is martial arts is good for your brain. I mean, so that was exciting to us. That was extremely thought-provoking and just intriguing. And we wanted to, capitalize on that and work with that. And then we started thinking, well, if it works for Manny, why couldn't it work for more children? Why couldn't it work for other people in general? Why couldn't it work for, neurotypical folks? So
I know that I have gotten several referrals from special needs kids. Their parents would take them to speech therapy classes and things, and a lot of time their teachers would recommend martial arts, and it's probably for the reasons you just mentioned. That physical activity and gets the neurons growing and things of that and firing. And so there is, I've seen that, but I agree that I think that is a huge part that is a missed, I won't even say opportunity, but missed in general, that it's very hard to find a martial arts program or school that can have the ability to work with these type of students. And I think part of it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it takes someone who really is passionate and wants to. Not everyone can do it. 100%. Not every martial art instructor has the ability to do that. Like they could be the greatest martial artist and a great instructor, but just working with that level is different.
Right.
Because you have to understand things like, where do they start? What is growth? Where can they go? And things of that nature. How has, you've talked about the growth you've seen in Manny, with him doing martial arts and things like that, but also in his confidence. Do you think that same thing applies to even a non-special need kid? Like if they're moving around getting the same thing, they're still going to get those coming out of their shell, getting more confident. So
absolutely. And I think it's honestly one of the things that makes martial arts, at least for me, makes it so addictive, right? Because because you can feel it yourself. You feel that sense of confidence, that sense of, I can do something that's hard. I can do something that's I've seen other people do that I didn't think I could do. Mm-hmm. And for Manny and for other children with varying rates of ability, they do things it may be in their own way or in their own timing, and it may look a little different from what you see the average student doing, but you can see success. So you start at a certain level. It's one of those, martial arts is one of those sports where you are only in competition with yourself, truly. I mean, yes, there are martial arts competitions, but the real journey is you against your old self. So that progress, you start at a certain level and then you progress from there. It's not about where you end up at. It's the difference between where you started and where you are. So for him, that looks a lot different. Things like trying to memorize a form was very challenging for him. Mm-hmm. And so what we found out was we break those forms down into a lot smaller components and we repeat and we repeat and we repeat. And what I saw was he loved it though. You would think with so much repetition, the average kid would be like, enough, I don't want to do block punch anymore. But he, as he sees himself succeed, the smile on his face is just so valuable. And he comes back, we practice in the mornings, we practice in the evenings, and he never says no. He always wants to do it. And that's something that he never did before. It was always, his favorite word was no. And he still likes that word, but he says no and then does it. But no, he enjoys doing it. And that's the thing, it's fun for him because it's a fun sport, but also because he feels his own success and he's proud of himself. He really feels like, this is something he can do. And so then the struggle kind of becomes, so how do you measure that success for somebody who is not your average student.
Right. Well, and you mentioned that repetition, and you would think that the average. I can go on arguments and tangents about that all day long, but I get it. Yes, if you do the same thing over and over and over, it might get boring. However, I have found with kids, especially the younger ones or special needs, that it's not about the repetition. It's just like you said, if they know what to expect and they feel like they are successful at it, and they're like, I can do this so good, the other kids are going to look up to me, that repetition goes out the window real fast because they know, they're like, oh, I know this move. Look at how good I can do it because I've done it 100 times. They don't mind doing it again because at that point they're kind of showing off.
And we bring this into our program in a few multiple ways. We start our new class schedule every Saturday, and then we work on the same moves throughout the week. And since we recommend going to multiple classes a week, a student can be there on Saturday, learn it for the first time. Might be tricky the first time, but then when they're back on, let's say Wednesday the next week, they feel a lot better because they've got that repetition again. They're doing something they've seen before. And I've always been a big proponent. I don't like moving on to the next thing until I feel like I at least understand what I'm doing. I don't want to learn a whole nother technique because then it's just too much to remember and I feel like I learned nothing. Getting the repetition, I feel like it's a really big part of it. But I can also understand, where people fear, especially teachers and parents fear that repetition will make their child feel bored with what they're doing.
Well, and I think that's the difference between Manny's favorite word used to be no. Then he started, and it was a struggle. But when he started feeling confident and like he could do it, then he started enjoying it. And I think that's where a lot of times, especially with kids that maybe have special needs, the struggle is that not so much, man, it's really hard to teach them. Well, they're probably equally as frustrated that they can't learn it. Why, in their mind, I'm sure they're thinking, why can't my body do this?
Right.
Why can't I do what I know how to do it? I see how to do it. My body just doesn't want to or has a limitation. It's like stretching. I'm not super flexible as a martial artist. That's always been a struggle for me. So I understand the concept of splits, but my body just goes clink and it locks up. That's frustrating for me. No one's fault. It's just one of those, it happens. And so it's getting over that initial hump, getting over that you can, it's just going to take a little longer to get there. And so I think that's where the quote unquote bored or I don't want to do the same thing is. It's not so much they don't want to do the same thing, it's they don't feel successful yet with it. Would you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, definitely. It's just a different way of learning also. For Manny, the process of repeating something is not tedious to him. For him, it's comforting. Like he has that. It's also he has a comfort in routine, and in a lot of different special needs. A lot of times the people will really thrive on having a certain set routine. Now, having said that, I also have been careful not to have something so structured that he can't do anything outside of that structure either, because that's a pitfall that you run into. It's like, well, we have a certain routine, but you have to be able to sometimes, maybe you don't have your bedtime routine a certain way and you have to be able to, sleep in a hotel room or you're, traveling or something. So you have the flexibility that's in there, but you still have that, that measure of success. Okay, well, the place might be different, but I still know how to do these individual steps. So the same thing goes in learning, for example, starting a new kata. So in the beginning, we taught him the first form and he did well with it. And I can get into how we did that a little bit more, but when it was time to do the next one, my fear was that he was either going to get them confused or he didn't want to try a new one. But then he realizes, oh, okay, I'm doing the same punch or the same block, it's just in a different direction or a different way, and I can still do it. And so those fundamentals that he, drilled 1,000 times on the first form, he was able to apply that to the second, and the successes started coming faster for him once he started making that correlation. And I think that's the way for all of us, because really, there's a lot to martial arts, but there's certain fundamentals that build on each other, right? So it's like you build on those foundational fundamentals and move forward.
Yeah, the best way to learn how to put a block up or a guard up, you can tell them all day long, you can show them, you can even put their arm there, but when you just take a little bag and swing it at their head and their hand comes up, and then you fix it, and then you do it again and again, eventually they learn, oh, if I do it this way, it stops it and I don't get bumped. Well, there you go. It's that building those fundamental skills, and then later that becomes natural. I remember when I used to do obstacle courses with him, to kind of emphasize or reinstate what you just said, was I would set up an obstacle course, he'd go through it, and then he'd start getting better at it, and then I'd be like, oh, great, well, let's take this and replace it. And he'd be like, no. He's like, I'm getting this one down. Why are you trying to change it on me? Silly Kevin, what the heck's going on? And so I would kind of let that. Now, the next private lesson, it would be a different obstacle course. It wasn't the same. But in that moment, he didn't want the change. And I think it was because of fear of failure. He started succeeding. He started understanding it. And he wanted more time to get that down. And I think that that's key in working with special needs is they may not, it seems like maybe they might be arguing the change, but really I think they're just trying to get their routine down. And so it's that balance of, okay, we need the structure. You can't just run the whole thing. You can't set up the obstacle course yourself. But I understand that once you get it down, we may not change it until the next lesson. So we can see that measure of success.
Yes, and also when you talk about things like adaptive PE, so in the special needs community, adaptive is a big buzzword. So for adaptive PE, or in this case, adaptive martial arts, as we've coined it,
AMA.
I think maybe instructors might get scared off by that a little bit, because what does that really mean? Well, it's something as simple as, for example, holding on to something while you do a kick, as opposed to just doing it, on your own. It's an adaptation that allows them a little bit of extra balance or a little bit of extra confidence building before they can fully do that technique on their own. So I have been using just improvised tools, like I use a dip bar that he holds onto to practice his side kicks now, so that we can get, because he's very flexible, he doesn't realize he's flexible, but so we can get those kicks higher, comparable to his flexibility. And it's all about balance, and it's a lot about confidence, and so that gives him a little measure of success that, yes, some people might look at that as cheating, but it just kind of balances things out for someone who has more natural muscle tone, more natural balance. It just gives him an opportunity to keep growing his skills while he's still developing the strength and the balance.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because you said, some people might view that as cheating, but any instructor, any martial arts instructor out there, if someone has an injury, they will say, we'll do what you can, modify as needed, so you can still stay out on the mat and continue training without re-injuring yourself. How is that any different than an adaptive program for kids with special needs? And the answer is it's not. It's not. If someone says, man, I've got this back injury, I can't do push-ups the way you want yet, but I can modify. Well, I'd rather you modify. It's the same thing. It's taking that modification instead of saying, well, you just can't do it. No. Modify it. Modify it to a point where they can. And then you can start seeing that success. And I wanted to bring this up because Joshua's been very quiet here. But this is very relevant because you talked about a measure of success. And there is another student that Joshua has worked with that has some adaptive learning that he has to do and some things of that. And at first, this was a very, very difficult, challenging student to work with, but we gave it time. We were patient. And now he's one of your favorite students, Joshua. Mm-hmm. Do you want to kind of talk about how that's made you feel working with them?
Just to give the overall details or the big picture is, the student came in, and for a while they really struggled to be part of class, to the point where it felt like, as the person teaching class, you cannot get them to even participate in class. And then I had to deal with, meltdowns whenever things didn't go their way, other issues, and it was frustrating to work with. And this was before we really got to know the kid, and it was just challenging. But then I did start to notice, and I think the other teachers as well, that the kid's pretty smart, picks up on like really small things. They can be very literal at times about it, but they pick up on these things you're saying, and you don't even realize, that. You see them, when they're struggling, when it's a challenge, that you don't also see the kind of the success at first. But then continue working with this kid. I think they're, also working on things outside the dojo, which always helps. There's never one solution to these things. But as I start to see them kind of grow and work through some of their challenges outside the dojo, it also helps them within here. And then they, attitude improves, their success improves, and their just overall ability. And then it gets to the point where, I think as the teachers, we start to switch the way we think about, this student and other students like them in the past, where, they might do something that would typically frustrate you or seem like a student who's not focusing, but their way of learning is by, doing that. A student, this student in particular likes to talk a lot, and that can be frustrating when you're teaching, to have a student who just won't quit talking. But when I realized that by repeating what I say back to me is how this student learns, and them talking constantly is how that they are processing the information, and it helps them understand. And not too long ago, the student, passed their first test here at the dojo, and that was kind of a big moment for them, but also, it meant a lot to me as a teacher to see the growth this kid made over, their first year plus at the dojo. And, it was touching for me as well. And I think for the kid, definitely.
I think that you hit it. And that is, as a teacher, we have these expectations where it's like, you need to sit, focus, no talking, eyes on me. And if you're not, you're being disrespectful. Whereas that may not be the case. It is so, I've been called out by this, and I kind of go, that's not how I want that to go as a teacher, where I'm talking and I notice a kid, they're not paying attention. It looks like they're picking at their toes or whatever. And then I'll call them, we'll say, little Johnny or whatever, John Doe, eyes up here. What did I just say? Because I think they're not paying attention. And then they will repeat back to me verbatim, word for word, exactly what I said. What do I do? Well, you clearly were paying attention. It's just you're very auditory. If you were looking at me, it actually is more distracting because I'm very boisterous with my hands, as people listening can't tell. So they were instead focused on something minimal so they could hear what I was saying. Mm-hmm. And until you understand that that's how that kid learns, you might take that as them not paying attention or being disrespectful. And I think with an adaptive program, it's really no different than understanding how each student learns, how each kid learns, how each person learns.
That's so true. And I think one of the things that we're realizing with what I'm doing with Manny and what we're doing with Manny is, the person that knows your child the best is typically the parent. It's either a parent or a sibling or somebody really close to that child. And so the fact that I'm in there, and because I'm a martial artist and have been one for a long time, I was able to do that. But I'm in there helping him. I'm in there giving him some direct, feedback and tying it into how I know he learns and how and the struggles that I know that he has. While I don't know that every parent would feel comfortable doing that, I think that a family way of learning, at least for the concentrated class, as you put it, I think helps both the student and the teachers, because the instructors that have been helping with Manny learned about Manny, learned how he learns, and I was part of that, and so we kind of had almost a group class, like a family class, that weekend hour, just 1 hour a week. It wasn't like a huge investment that we did together. So along those lines, learning who your students are, that's why I think private lessons are amazing, because it gives you as an instructor that exact insight that in a larger group it may take longer to figure that out or to realize specific nuances of each child or adult for that matter, because they may not be able to tell you, or it may come across one way and it's really not what it seems to be, or it may be both. It may be annoying and it may be the way that they learn. So you're right. Learning how that student works. It's adapt. I mean, we kind of have to adapt for everyone to a certain degree. It's just that people with special needs typically need a larger amount of adaptation, and it can look a number of different ways. It may be something as simple as more time to learn something, like more time to rank up to that next belt level, or we've kind of taken an approach with Manny of almost like an equivalent of a IEP in school, so an individual education plan. When you have a child with special needs in a elementary school, for example, they typically follow an IEP. So for Manny, it's been, okay, where is Manny now, and how do we get him to feel accomplished by earning that next rank? The colored belts in martial arts, in my opinion, they serve as milestone markers for skill and for maturity in the art, but it's also a motivator. It's an encouragement to say, okay, I am making progress. I see I have my yellow belt now, and those types of things. So that's also important. But there's all kinds of approaches for how to do that, because for Manny, I didn't want to water things down or have him just earning a belt without truly earning that belt. I wanted him to literally earn that in the same amount of sweat and time and sweat equity, as we call it, that all people put into that next milestone. The same he has gone to tournaments, and I know there's different schools of thought on tournaments, whether they're good or they're bad, but they're fun. And so we did some tournaments, and Manny enjoyed it. And I was really concerned because, if you can imagine, him being shy in front of a class of friends and peers, what is it going to be like when he's in front of an audience with, a crowd of people staring at him? And he did great. His scores were, sometimes he finishes dead last. In fact, most of the time he finishes dead last in every category. We've only been doing forms and weapons forms so far. The sparring is a little different topic, but he may get the lowest score, but he's still up there smiling from ear to ear, because he knows that he did his form and he did it in front of all those people, and the judges, acknowledged him as being just an average kid. We've been approached before saying, hey, do you want him to have a separate category? Do you want him to get a trophy anyway? And we're like, no, we want him to feel like part of that group, that part of that bigger picture. And just like any other child, he wins or loses on his own merit. And and he has done just fine with that. He doesn't, I don't want to say he doesn't care. He understands when he is getting a trophy or an award or some kind of accolade. He understands that too, but he's happy even if he doesn't. So the measure of success for him in that scenario was not winning first place or even third place. It was getting up there and having the courage to showcase what he's been working so hard on.
Well, and I think that that's so important, that people understand that it is that measure of success, and that looks different for everyone. And it's very easy to say, here's what you have to be able to do to be X belt, period. And that may be a very broad general, but there is always going to be exceptions. And those exceptions go both ways. And I think that's what a lot of people miss, is that there may be someone who's very naturally talented, and they might be able to come in and as a yellow belt start beating purple belts in a sparring match. That doesn't mean I'm going to give them a purple belt. It means their standard is higher, that I'm going to hold them to their level. Someone may have a lower standard. Their accomplishment may be very different. You spoke of the person with Down syndrome that was the first person to complete an Ironman. He completed it. That was the goal, was the completion of, not a placement in it, but the completion of it. And that's a huge accomplishment, to be the first person with Down syndrome to be able to do that. I mean, but he accomplished it in the grand scheme of things. That's the top tier for someone that has those kind of struggles. That's where it's like, that's the goal for them. And so I think it's not fair to hold a blanket requirement for every single student. There has to be, based on their whatever things of that nature. I don't want to say it's the cop-out of everyone's on their own journey, because as you said, he competes, he doesn't always win, he doesn't always get a trophy, his scores may not always be the best, but his goal is the fact that he did that competition in front of a group of people that he didn't know. And I think that idea is important when we're talking about what it means to, as you mentioned, get the next belt, get the next rank. It may take them a little longer, but they will still earn it of their own merit. That merit is going to be different based on the person.
When I did a competition class recently with some students, and we worked on, much more competitive, and each week we were competing against each other. And overall, the class was made up of, some of our, you could say above average students here, students who have been committed for a while, are skilled, are talented. But even within that, there was, a few who kind of always outperformed the rest. And it, as a teacher, it was hard for me at first to admit that, because I wanted everyone in the class to feel the same amount of success. But then after a few months, and I could tell each student was improving and looked better at this stuff than when they started, is when, I started to see, the value. And same thing in regular classes, a student who starts sparring as an orange belt, and then by the time they get to green belt, they're still not, the best at sparring, but they are capable more than they once were, is big. And I feel like as teachers, you've got to be able to look at your student body as a whole, but also individual of, you have to know who you're working with. It can't just be another face in the crowd. You got to know each person individually.
And I think that, and really, you can go into the ins and outs of how to teach an adaptive program or someone with special needs, but at the end of the day, and I think you have kind of said this, Isabelle, it's getting to know them. Get to know them, get to know what their accomplishments are, get to know what they're capable of, and there you go. It's just, it may take a little extra time to get to know that student, but really it's no different than teaching any other student. Once you get to know them and say, okay, this is where you're at, this is how we get you where you need to go, and then there you go.
and it's so worth it. The saying of the harder you work at something, the bigger the reward. It goes the same for teaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you know somebody struggled and you know that they worked really hard, and then you see them finally get it, finally get that skill down, or that kata down, or finally able to go up and perform something in front of the instructor and with confidence, it's a great feeling. It's so worthwhile. And people draw their inspirations from all kinds of directions. So you think a lot about when the average person who doesn't do martial arts thinks of martial arts, they might think of the movies or the Netflix shows or whatever, and they think of that as martial arts. And you see a lot of flashy kicks and really beautiful talented skill, which is great. But you also people get inspired by all kinds of things. So at one or more of these tournaments that we've gone to with Manny, and he always competes with all the other kids, and they love it. They always want him to go. Make sure Manny's coming, But I've had parents come up to me and say, hey, my son has Down syndrome, and we didn't think he could do something like this, but we saw your son out there, and they want to know more, and they connect with me. And next thing I know, we're friends on Facebook or what have you, and we're talking about how we got there. One particular family had 16-year-old twins, and the daughter was black belt, and the son didn't do martial arts, and he didn't do a number of things. He didn't participate, and they didn't feel like he could. But because he saw Manny, now the daughter is all excited, and she's teaching her twin brother how to do martial arts, and they're seeing progress. And so they got inspiration from Manny, even though Manny was not by any stretch the most talented child out there doing the fanciest kata or the most difficult, weapons form or anything like that. He was just being him, and he was an inspiration to others.
Oh, that's so good to hear. And I mean, talent's such an interesting term, because that is talent for someone like Manny. I mean, it really is. But really, at the end of the day, that talent came from dedication, perseverance, not just from him, but also from you as a parent, and having people around and a support system around for him. And so I guess as we're kind of wrapping up, I would say, if you have or know anyone that has special needs, don't discredit what you think they can do. Give them the chance and support them any way you can. Because I think that people will surprise us. And sometimes we always put in our own heads what we are capable of or what someone else is capable of. Give them a chance. Give them a chance to do it. And if it's something they love to do, they'll make it happen. And if you're supportive and encouraging, as you have been with him, those things will happen. And like you said, it'd be an inspiration to others. You are an inspiration to us that you have been able to accomplish this. Like you're an inspiration to me that you are able to make this happen and work with him and develop those connections. So
I enjoy it. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There are times when it's really tough, and there are struggles, and just like with any other kids, he has his good days and his bads. But I enjoy working with him. I enjoy seeing the results, and I also enjoy hopefully being able to share that with more people. We have done a couple of trial classes with a group of kids from the local Down Syndrome Association that we're affiliated with. So we've tried to see what we can do on a more larger scale, and just kind of did some test classes. And our goal is to see what that would look like as a larger group. So I know we talked about in private lessons, but this would be like a private class almost in a small group, 10 or less children or young adults in a class, and then having them tie back into a regular curriculum in a standard class as well. So it's my passion and my joy to share with others, because it's the love of martial arts is so addictive, because it has so many wonderful benefits to so many people, and it can be a lifelong thing. It's not one of those things you can only do as a child or as a teenager. I'm 52 years old, and I'm still out there loving every minute of it. I still compete in tournaments. I still break boards and have all that good fun. So
21, you all heard it.
when you can share that with others and all those benefits, it's what it's all about, right?
Oh.
It's one of the things I love about martial arts is that, no matter where you start, that as long as you try, you can succeed and you can get better. Knowing where Manny started, where he is now, like, just because he tried and it's something he wanted to do and that he had people supporting him. That's the biggest thing I would say to anyone listening, that martial arts or whatever, as long as you try and you keep at it. We've all been doing martial arts for years, and we've had our share of successes over the years, and you're about to have another big success this week testing for your black belt. But it just takes trying and committing to something. If it's something you want to do, you can do it. I feel like you just have to know what success is to you. I think that's now the second time I've said that this season.
So we'll wrap it up here. Thank you, Isabelle, so much for coming on and taking time to talk with us. We always appreciate having guests on, and you all taking the time for us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed myself.
Awesome, fantastic. And we will get out of here. Thank you all for listening. Keep listening. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, especially on this episode, kids with special needs questions, let us know. We'll get back to you, or we'll ask Isabelle and then get back to you. So always keep those questions coming.
Thank you all. Keep kicking
for a living.